Today's topic today, we are talking about hematocrit. But here's the thing. I want to talk about why the hematocrit is not something that you should really be tripping out over. It's not something that you should have a lot of anxiety about, or you should develop a lot of excessive worriness, nor should your provider develop that either. Because we all know that some guys that get on TRT, they may experience an increase in their hematocrit. And, excuse me, and if you don't know what your hematocrit is, it's a measurement of a percent of red blood cells relative to the volume of whole blood. In other words, what percent of your red blood cells do you have floating around at any given time? And the hematocrit, it's a snapshot of what you look like at that moment. It's a transient number. It changes from day to day. It changes with drinking fluids, okay? But some guys, when they do experience hematocrit increases, unfortunately, their provider says, you gotta donate blood. And oftentimes they're told you gotta do it every 60 days, every 90 days, whatever. And if they don't have donate blood, then they're told their hematocrit is going to cause them to have a stroke. That's why we're here today. That's what I wanted to discuss today, because the advice that you have to donate blood based on an arbitrary number on a piece of paper at a given point in time that has dozens of underlying etiologies for it, well, that's quite antiquated. So this is a good segue. So I want to talk about why your red blood cells increase in response to testosterone, okay? So there's this hormone called erythropoietin, and it's produced by the kidneys. And its production is stimulated by testosterone. So we know you get on testosterone, it can increase EPO production from the kidneys. And EPO tells the bone marrow to make more red blood cells. This operates in a negative feedback-like manner. So once EPO tells the bone marrow to make red blood cells, once it hits a certain set point, which for everyone it's different, we don't know what it is, we can't predict it, but once it hits that set point, production backs off. Cool? Now, here's the difference. When you're on exogenous testosterone, that EPO production doesn't necessarily hit that negative feedback at the same level that it would had you not been on testosterone. What this tells us is that exogenous testosterone may actually increase where that set point negative feedback is. So let's say hypothetically, for instance, you are not on testosterone. Your hematocrit stays around 48, 49, 50. Okay? Now let's say you got on TRT. Let's say it's 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, whatever, it doesn't matter. And your hematocrit hovers around 54, 55. What this lets us know is that on testosterone, that negative feedback has now pushed that set point a little bit higher than had you not been on testosterone. And so that's one thing about the hematocrit that's different being on TRT, is that it has a higher set point, it has a higher ceiling, but guess what? It doesn't just keep climbing up and up and up and up. It doesn't do that. It just pushes the set point a little bit higher. But that's where the problem is. A lot of providers will say, oh, it's going to keep climbing up, it's going to keep climbing up, it's going to keep climbing up, and then they're going to tell you you've got to donate blood. But guess what? You donate blood, and a few months later you come back, you check your labs again, guess what? Hematocrit's back where it was prior donating blood. And that's one of the big principles, though, is that it'll always go back to where it was. It's not going to keep climbing up and up. Furthermore, a lot of providers need to take into account that there are dozens of other things that can actually increase your hematocrit. We already know testosterone can. That's beyond the scope of what we're talking about here. But one of the most common things I see that actually increases people's hematocrit, super common, is sleep apnea. Yes, sleep apnea. It can increase your hematocrit as well. Another thing that can increase it that I see commonly are people that live at high altitudes. So you'd actually be surprised how many patients, as far as they live in Denver, they live in Colorado, whatever, before they even get to TRT, before they get on TRT, at our initial consult, we'll look at their bloods. A good chunk of those patients already have hematocrits 54, 55, 56, and that's merely because they live at high altitudes. So if you're wondering, let me explain this. High altitudes can increase hematocrit. Here's why. Red blood cells, their job is to carry oxygen, okay? So if you live at a high altitude, there's less oxygen up there. Your body's going to compensate. It's going to increase more red blood cells in an effort to capture whatever oxygen it possibly can. Same concept goes with sleep apnea. Sleep apnea. you're not breathing. And what do? A third of our lives, we sleep. So if you're not breathing a third of your life, you're chronically hypoxic. Therefore, your body's going to compensate. It's going to increase more red blood cell production in an effort to capture as much oxygen as it can and disseminate it throughout the body. Besides sleep apnea, besides living at high altitude, dehydration is another common cause that I see. Oftentimes, guys will come, they'll get their bloods, the hematocrit may be a little elevated, a couple points over. If they had chugged a bottle of water, if they stayed adequately hydrated, it comes down. A lot of times they are just dehydrated and they're having a volume contraction. Another thing I see, which I don't understand why people still do this, is smoking. Yes, people still smoke nowadays. Seems relatively foreign to me, but they still do. Smoking, again, will deplete you of oxygen. You compensate, you make more red blood cells in an effort to offset that loss of oxygen. Lung diseases can do it as well. COPD, that's another prime example. Other examples include kidney disease can cause it because kidneys are related with the EPO production. Burns, burn injuries, trauma injuries, shock, those can all cause volume contraction and thus make your hematocrit look elevated. But of all the dozens of different etiologies, the one that gets the bad rap is TRT. And according to most medical professors, most anybody that hears TRT, they think hematocrit equals donate blood or you get a stroke. Absolutely not. It's wrong. That's an antiquated notion.
Check out my TRT workout split or the ebook The Ultimate Guide to TRT Cream. Links to the merchandise shop in the description.